What happens when the man who signs the checks finds himself at the mercy of the people cashing them? That question hit Tucker Hawley hard as he sat behind the call desk at Store 4, headset slipping over his ears, the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air. 7 years ago, he bought out a struggling tech support chain and turned it into a modest success. 7 stores across 3 cities. Lines were steady, reviews decent, but lately, something felt off. His executive team kept feeding him numbers. Call resolution time is down. Customer satisfaction is up. But then came the emails. A single mother charged twice for a service she never used. A veteran customer locked out of his own account for days. And when Tucker asked for answers from the district manager, he only got vague excuses. Probably a fluke, they'd say. We're short-staffed working on it. Tucker didn't buy it. He hadn't met most of the current store workers. The company had grown fast, and training was mostly handled by managers. None of the frontline employees would know his face. Most just knew the name on the paycheck, if that. So he shaved his beard, dyed his hair blonde, slapped on a pair of thick glasses, and introduced himself as Ty, a new hire from a temp agency helping with the call queue. Store 4 was the busiest of the 7. Call volume was high and turnover even higher. Management blamed burnout. Tucker wanted to see for himself. Ty, you done with onboarding? A young woman asked, dropping a headset on his desk. Yeah, just about, he replied, adjusting in his seat. You're Celia, I'll train you, don't worry, it's pretty simple. Listen to the customer, follow the script, and if they push back, well, just tell them that's company policy. Her voice was clipped but not cold, just tired. They got to work. The phones didn't stop ringing. Password resets, billing issues, service outages. Tucker struggled to keep up, fumbling with the outdated software. Celia covered for him more than once, stepping in with a calm voice and quick fingers. She never snapped, even when things got messy. Around noon, he spotted a man pacing near the back wall, arms crossed, watching everything. The badge said Manager Brent. He didn't greet Tucker, just nodded and moved on. By day's end, Tucker could barely feel his legs. He sat next to Celia in the break room, sipping lukewarm water. You always this slammed? He asked. Celia let out a dry laugh. This is a light day. We're down 2 people. One quit last week. Other one called out sick again. Why are people quitting? She looked around, lowered her voice. Brent, he's intense, and it's not just him. We're expected to hit these quotas, calls per hour, resolved tickets, but they don't give us enough tools. So people fudge numbers or they leave. Tucker leaned in. Fudge numbers, Celia hesitated. Look, I like this job, I need this job, but yeah, sometimes Brent tells us to close tickets that aren't actually fixed, just so we hit targets. Tucker felt a weight in his chest. How often? Every day. He didn't respond. He couldn't. Instead, he forced a smile. Thanks for being honest, she stood. You seem decent, Ty. Just keep your head down, okay? That night, Tucker sat in his rental car, hands gripping the steering wheel, his jaw clenched. He wanted to believe this was just one bad manager pushing too hard. But if it was happening here, what about the other stores? He pulled out his notepad, names, shifts, patterns. He'd work another shift tomorrow, get deeper. He needed to see it with his own eyes, and by the end of the week, he did. At Store 2, a call tech named Marcus was quietly told by the manager, just mark it fixed. She won't know the difference. At Store 6, a new girl cried after being yelled at for escalating too many calls. At Store 5, a man was told, don't waste time fixing, just close and move on. But it was back at Store 4 where everything finally cracked. It was Friday. Tucker was helping an elderly man named Roger navigate a billing issue. The man had been overcharged for nearly 6 months and was clearly flustered. Tucker was walking him through the process when Brent slid a sticky note onto his desk. Close it. Too much time. Tucker looked up. But it's not resolved. Brent didn't lower his voice. It doesn't matter. We're behind. Close it and move to the next. Roger, still on the line, repeated, hello, are you still there? Tucker froze. He remembered Roger's voice. He was one of the complaints from weeks ago. The one they said was handled. Celia noticed Tucker's hesitation and quickly took over his next call. Tucker stood up, heart pounding. He walked to the back room, closed the door behind him, and sat in silence. He was the CEO of this company, and his customers were being lied to. His employees were being pushed to lie, and tomorrow. That would end. Saturday morning, before the sun had even touched the strip mall's concrete, Tucker sat at the back of the employee lot in the same rental car, watching the side entrance of Store 4. A slow trickle of employees walked in. Two he recognized, one he didn't. When the door finally swung open again, Brent arrived. He didn't greet anyone, didn't hold the door, just walked in with sunglasses still on and his phone pressed to his ear. Tucker waited 10 minutes before heading inside. The floor was already humming. Phones were ringing, keyboards clacking. The air felt heavier than usual, maybe because of what he knew now. Celia looked up from her station and gave a nod. No smile, but her eyes said enough. She had stayed later than scheduled the night before, helping a new hire figure out how to properly log hardware trouble reports. She hadn't complained once. He booted up his terminal, thumbed through the queue, and picked up a call from a woman named Leela. Her voice trembled as she explained her router had been replaced 3 times in 2 months, and she was still being charged for each replacement. She sounded exhausted. Tucker pulled her file. There were notes, but no resolution. The last entry was 2 days ago. Customer advised issue resolved. Ticket closed. It hadn't been. He asked her to hold. Then he stood and walked over to Brent's office, gently tapping the door. Brent looked up from his dual monitors. Yeah, I've got a customer. Says she was charged for 3 replacements, but issues still going on. Notes say it was fixed. Brent leaned back. If it's closed, but it wasn't fixed. The notes say otherwise. You know they're not accurate. Brent's jaw tightened. That's not your call to make. I'm not trying to look, Brent cut in, standing now. We don't have time to babysit every call. You're new, right? Do your job, follow the logs, and leave the rest to management. Tucker didn't reply. He turned and walked back to his station. The call had already dropped. He sat in silence for a second, then picked up the next one. A man with a prepaid account locked out after an update. Simple fix. He stayed polite, professional, but his mind was somewhere else. Around noon, he noticed a girl 16, maybe 17, sitting awkwardly near the printer bay, knees drawn up, holding her elbow like it hurt. She wasn't in uniform. Celia noticed too. She walked over and crouched beside her. You okay? The girl shook her head. Celia looked around, then waved Tucker over without saying anything. When he got closer, the girl looked up. Her eye was red, like she'd been crying. She came to ask about her dad, Celia whispered. He used to work here, said his name was Roberto. Tucker's stomach tightened. He'd seen that name, Roberto Alvarez. He was on the staff schedule 2 weeks ago, no longer listed. I just wanted to ask for his last paycheck, the girl said quietly. It never showed up. We've been trying to get answers, but no one calls us back. Celia glanced at Tucker, then at the office door. You wait here, Tucker said. We'll find out. They stepped into the hallway near the break room. That name sound familiar? Tucker asked. Yeah, Celia nodded. He was here when I started. Quiet guy, always early, got let go suddenly. Brent said he was behind on call volume. Tucker pressed his lips together. You ever see his numbers? No, but he never missed a day. Trained half the people here. The girl was still sitting near the printer, shoulders hunched. Tucker walked back toward Brent's office, this time not knocking. Hey, he said, stepping inside. Brent didn't look up. Something else. Yeah, a girl is out there asking about her dad, Roberto. She says he got fired and never received his final check. Brent sighed. That again, I told payroll. He didn't return the company modem. No return, no paycheck. That's policy. What if he never got the return label? Not my problem. He signed the off-boarding form. He speaks very limited English. Brent looked up now. So, it's a professional environment. If he can't follow instructions, that's not my fault. Tucker stared at him. You think that's acceptable? I think we're not a charity. Without a word, Tucker turned and walked out. He found Celia. Keep an eye on her. I'll be right back. He stepped outside, called the CFO directly, explained everything. The girl, the missing check, the withheld payment over a modem. Get me his address, the CFO said. I'll handle it today. Tucker walked back in, leaned down to the girl. You'll hear from someone by tonight. Thank you for coming in, and I'm sorry. She nodded, eyes wide. Thank you. She left quietly. Celia watched her go. Later that afternoon, Celia pulled Tucker aside while walking to the storeroom. You're not like the others, she said. What do you mean? You listen. You don't just nod and move on. He didn't answer right away. The people here, she continued, they want to do things right. But we're told not to. You push too hard, you're out, and nobody wants to end up like Roberto. That night, the final shift ended with 2 call agents staying behind to finish unresolved tickets. Celia stayed late again. Brent had already gone home. Tucker waited until the last employee left. Then he unlocked the back storeroom, pulled out a small binder from his bag and placed it on the desk. It held copies of call logs, ticket closures, and handwritten notes from the week. He sent one message to his executive assistant: "Clear my Monday. I'm calling a full leadership meeting." Non-negotiable. Then he shut off the lights, locked the door behind him, and walked into the night air, knowing tomorrow he wouldn't be walking in as Ty anymore. Monday, just after 8 a.m. The conference room at headquarters filled slowly with department heads and regional managers. Some looked confused, others annoyed. Brent was the last to arrive, taking the seat closest to the window, arms folded, his expression unreadable. Tucker entered without fanfare. He wore no suit, no tie, just a plain gray sweater and jeans. But the moment he stepped in, the room quieted. No one had seen him in weeks. He didn't sit. "You're all wondering why this meeting was called," he began, voice low, steady, "so I'll get straight to it. I spent the last 10 days working inside our stores. As a temp. Name tag said Ty, some of you met me. Most of you didn't notice." He let the silence settle before continuing. "I didn't shadow executives or observe from a distance. I answered phones, took complaints, watched how our systems actually work or don't, and what I saw was unacceptable." A few shifted in their seats. Brent didn't move. Tucker pulled a folder from his side, opened it, and laid the first sheet flat on the table. "This is a ticket from Store 4. Customer charged for 3 hardware replacements. None of them solved her issue, but the ticket was marked resolved." He flipped to the next, Store 2. "A customer locked out of his services for nearly a week. Agent tried to escalate. Manager told him to close it instead." He moved down the pile, Store 6. "A new hire was reprimanded for doing exactly what we trained her to do: escalate unresolved issues. She was told to stop wasting time, and the manager logged her as underperforming." He stepped back from the table. "These aren't isolated incidents, they're a pattern, and the root of it isn't the employees." He looked directly at Brent. "It's leadership." Brent's eyebrows lifted. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm stating facts. You directed employees to falsify records. You pressured them to close unresolved tickets. And you withheld a final paycheck from a terminated employee under the false claim of missing equipment, despite knowing he likely didn't understand the return process." "That's policy," Brent said flatly. "We can't chase down every mistake. If we start bending rules, we're not talking about rules, we're talking about ethics." Brent leaned forward. "I've kept that store afloat, high volume, low staff, and we still hit targets. Because you forced numbers to look good." Tucker turned to the others. "I've seen the real numbers. The ones behind the dashboards. Escalations are buried, resolution times are doctored, and employees, good ones, are walking out because they're being told to lie." He walked to the whiteboard and picked up a marker. "We built this company to help people, not to trick them into thinking they were helped. If the only way you know how to lead is by cutting corners and squeezing the people below you, then you don't belong here." Brent stood, chair scraping back. "You're overreacting. You think you're seeing the whole picture, but you're not. Those stores need pressure or they fall apart. You think you can fix this with speeches, but you're not the one doing the dirty work." Tucker's face didn't change. "I was, for 10 days, and I never once had to lie to do the job right." He turned to the HR director seated near the back. "Effective immediately, Brent is terminated. Final paycheck will be processed today. Escort him out." Brent's face drained of color. "You're serious?" "Completely." Brent turned to the HR director, then back to Tucker. "You'll regret this. You'll see what happens when you let the frontline run the show." Tucker didn't reply. He simply stepped aside as Brent was led out. The air in the room shifted. "I know some of you are wondering where this leaves you. So let me be clear. This company will no longer reward inflated metrics or penalize people for doing the right thing. Starting today, we're rebuilding our internal standards from the ground up." He looked at the director of operations. "I want a new reporting structure that tracks unresolved issues separately. No more burying escalations." Then to HR. I want every employee who left in the last 3 months contacted, ask them why. Record it. And I want a direct line for current employees to report pressure or misconduct. Anonymous if needed, he turned back to the table. Celia Nunes from Store 4 is being promoted to training supervisor. She's already mentoring new hires unofficially. Let's make it real. A few heads turned. Someone scribbled the name down, and one more thing. We're opening a new team, Quality Integrity. Their job isn't to monitor call times, it's to listen to how we're treating people, customers and employees both. He paused. We lost sight of that. I lost sight of that. He closed the folder. I'm not asking anyone here to be perfect. But I am demanding honesty. If that's a problem, you won't need to wait for an investigation. You can leave now. No one moved. He nodded once, then turned and left the room. By early afternoon, word had spread. At Store 4, Celia received the call from HR just after her lunch break. She didn't say much, just covered her mouth with her hand and sat down hard on the edge of the desk. She didn't cry. Instead, she quietly asked her supervisor if she could finish her shift before heading to HQ in Store 2. Marcus noticed new posters going up in the break room. Integrity line, it said, for when doing the right thing gets you punished. At HQ, Tucker returned to his office and shut the door. For the first time in weeks, his inbox was full of messages. He wanted to read some from customers thanking staff for finally following through. Others from employees who'd never felt safe enough to speak up before. One read simply, "Whoever Ty was, tell him he gave us hope." He sat back staring at the screen. He'd built this company from the ground up, but somewhere along the way he'd mistaken growth for success. Now, finally, he understood the difference. Success wasn't hitting targets. Success was doing right by the people who made those targets possible. And from now on, that would be the only metric that mattered. The first week after Brent's termination wasn't smooth. Store 4 operated short-handed, with his shifts redistributed among assistant managers and senior agents. No one celebrated openly. Instead, there was a steady undercurrent of caution, like the whole store was waiting to see if this change would stick, or if it was just another quick fix from above that would fade like the rest. But the follow-through came fast, and it came tangibly. 3 days after the leadership meeting at HQ, a man in his early 40s with soft-spoken confidence introduced himself as Darren, the interim manager for Store 4. He didn't come in with speeches or sweeping promises. He met with each employee quietly, listened more than he talked, and made one thing clear from the beginning. I'm not here to push numbers. I'm here to make sure we're doing things the right way, because if we do that, the numbers will follow. During his first full shift, he spent more time on the floor than in the office. When Celia flagged a discrepancy between a customer's billing history and what the system showed, Darren sat beside her and walked through it, step by step, until they found the software glitch. He stayed past closing to document it and flagged it to IT before he left. Word started to spread among the staff, not just in Store 4, but across the other branches. The integrity line was getting real use. Stories began circulating of employees who reported questionable practices and, instead of being reprimanded, were thanked. One even received a written apology from a regional supervisor who had ignored their concerns months prior. At Store 6, one of the executive assistants was reassigned to shadow the evening shift, taking notes on where resources were stretched too thin. She didn't interfere, just observed. At the end of the week, she submitted a request for 2 additional hires and a revision to the scheduling algorithm that had previously assigned overlapping break times for peak hours. Back at headquarters, Tucker was no longer operating from the executive suite. He'd moved his workspace to an open desk near the shared operations bullpen. There was no announcement. He just showed up with a laptop and asked where he could plug in. One afternoon, Celia arrived for her first day in her new role. She was early, dressed in a pressed navy blouse, holding a small notebook with a list of ideas she'd stayed up late drafting. Tucker greeted her with a quiet nod as she stepped into the training room. "I'm not used to giving input that actually goes somewhere," she said, a little hesitant as she opened the notebook. Tucker handed her a schedule draft. "Then let's make sure it does." They spent the next 2 hours revising the onboarding flow. Celia pointed out that new hires were shown procedures before learning the context. Tucker adjusted the layout. She flagged that the escalation protocol was buried in a PDF appendix. He made a note to pull it out and turn it into a separate module. When they finished, Celia glanced at the clock. "Most new employees never meet anyone above store manager," she said. "I think that's why people stop caring. They stop believing anyone's watching." "I wasn't watching," Tucker admitted. "But I am now." Later that week, a customer named Roger, the same elderly man who'd been mishandled during Tucker's undercover shift, received a formal apology letter. Inside was not just a refund, but also a prepaid 1-year service voucher and a direct contact number to a senior support agent. He didn't call to thank anyone, but he didn't need to. The note he mailed back a week later was enough, handwritten in careful script. "Thank you. I thought I was invisible." Meanwhile, HR finished compiling the feedback from former employees who had left in the past 3 months. A report landed on Tucker's desk with patterns that were hard to ignore. Most cited the same issue: pressure to meet unrealistic metrics at the cost of integrity. Others mentioned feeling like complaints disappeared into a void. Several mentioned Brent by name. Tucker read each entry. Then he called the head of HR. "Reach out again," he said. "Tell them we'd like to offer return interviews. If they're willing, we'll bring them back with a proper reorientation and a clean slate." Not everyone accepted, but a few did. One of them, a quiet woman named Hannah, returned to store 2. She'd left after being written up for insubordination when she refused to close a ticket she knew wasn't resolved. Her write-up was formally expunged, and she was reinstated with back pay for the final missed week. In store 5, a problematic assistant manager who had regularly berated employees during closing shifts was quietly removed after multiple reports through the integrity line were verified. The termination was swift and unceremonious. He was escorted out without incident, and his replacement, a seasoned floor agent named Rena, stepped in with zero tolerance for the kind of behavior that had been allowed before. Not every fix was dramatic. Some were quiet, behind-the-scenes corrections. The customer service software was updated to include a new flag: escalation recommended. It allowed agents to mark tickets without penalizing their average resolution time, a small change, but one that made a difference. When a new call center opened in a satellite town, Tucker personally visited before the launch. He didn't give a speech. He just walked the floor, tested the equipment, and asked the trainers what they needed. He left behind his direct email, something he hadn't done in years. One morning, weeks later, Darren stopped by HQ to deliver a report in person. After handing it over, he asked if Tucker had a moment. "I wanted to ask if you'd consider something," Darren said. "Not for me, for the stores." Tucker motioned for him to sit. "Recognition," Darren said. "Not just performance-based, but for integrity. For doing the hard, quiet thing, like Celia did. Like Marcus did when he flagged a broken call log instead of just skipping it. We don't have a space for that yet." Tucker leaned back, thinking. "We do now." The next month, a new program launched, the Right Way Award. Each quarter, one employee from any store would be nominated by peers not for speed or volume, but for ethical judgment, helpfulness, and leading by example. Winners would receive a bonus, and their story would be shared across branches. The first recipient was Celia. On the day she received it, the staff at Store 4 gathered in the break room. Darren said a few words, but it was Marcus who summed it up best. She didn't just do the job. She made it better for the rest of us. Celia didn't cry. She smiled, held the plaque for a second, then quietly returned to her desk. There were still calls to take and customers waiting. But for the first time in a long time, she walked back to her station without the weight that had clung to her shoulders for over a year. That night, as the store closed and the last call agents logged out, Tucker sat in his car across the lot. He didn't go inside. He didn't need to. Through the front window, he saw the team finishing up a handful of real people, doing real work without fear. He watched the lights turn off one by one. Then, for the first time in a long while, he drove home without second-guessing the day. Not because everything was perfect, but because, finally, it was honest.